by the Holy Spirit that he would not die before he had seen the Lord's Christ. Well, it's a happy story because the promise of God turns out to be just exactly what he understood it to be. That Simeon, now very aged, was there in the temple, and when the child Jesus was brought in on the 8th day, as the law said, Simeon just knows and goes and picks up the child Jesus, holds it in his arm, and then he says, kind of wonderful words, Lord, you can now dismiss your servant in peace, for my eyes have seen your salvation. And he has that it's kind of a one. He has some great parting words because that's that he has lived long enough, and now let me die. I'll die in peace and joy because I've seen your salvation. Him holding the child Jesus there. Now, Simeon is in the habit of hoping, in the habit of looking for the things that God is doing and taking joy and holding hope. Again, that God will fulfill his promises, and that there will be things going on in his life that will be unfolding of God's love and God's purpose in his life. And it's interesting and very appropriate that he's an older man. If I was to go around with a little hope-o-meter, right? And the hope-o-meter would go up if somebody had a lot of hope, and kind of down if they didn't have a lot of hope. There would be a difference, noticeable difference in the crowd that you met, because the old people would be hopeful. And the younger you are, the more it tends to have a low hope-o-meter reading. It's as a general tendency, okay? If you want to grab me by the lapels after service, and if you're very young, if you're younger than me, if you want to grab me by the lapels and say, listen, I'm really hopeful, that would be a precious experience for me. And I would enjoy that. That would be like, I felt like I hadn't lived yet, But as a general thing, then, think about it. If you want to find it, if you're likely to find a depressed person, a person who feels like all the doors are shut before them, a person who feels like, today just seems to be like it's the last, it was like yesterday, tomorrow will be no different, and what's the use? These are things that young people say. Right? And the older you are, the more likely you are to sprout wings of hope, okay? And to kind of soar on the promises and just the promise and the excitement of life. Obviously, there are grumpy old codgers, and I find them to be, they're the light of my life too. I enjoy that, and so it's a general principle. The older you are, the more likely you are to have developed this habit of hope. And so Simeon is that older person. And notice, he's also an example, we might say, of somebody who is walking with that thing we call a personal relationship with God. And as we talk about to ourselves, okay, I'm reading in the scriptures, and I'm looking for things that give me a clue to how I and God can become, can get on together and take a next step. And we look for things like their responses. Simeon sees Jesus, and he is overjoyed. So a proper response to Christ is joy. And also you find that Simeon has descriptions of his walk with God going on. He was righteous. He had practiced his life long in the ways of living right and an upright and good and a moral life and doing right by other people and making good choices. And that's a part of your relationship with God, because you make those choices and find out that God, is there. He doesn't just let you down. His ways are wise ways. He was devout. He had spent a lot of time just seeking God in prayer and finding, both the ways to come together as in the groups, in the synagogues, and in the temple. Those were crowd scenes, where the psalms were being sung by a chorus of hundreds, and people were praying, and all corners around the temple, and sacrifice was being made on the altar. That wasn't a quiet place, but he sought God there. And to be known as devout would also mean that he sought God in the expectant. He wasn't, if you talked to him about what would be the top priority in his life, he said, all that God would do in my nation Israel, what his will is to do. So, and the Holy Spirit is on him. And that's something that will be said about Christ. The Holy Spirit was on him. That's something that will be said about the church after Easter Sunday. That who were they? They were people with the Holy Spirit upon them. And so there was an inward walk with God. And not only that, but a walk in God's strength and a walk in God's power. This is Simeon. He has a relationship with God, a personal relationship with God. And now, though the things of God are open to you at this instant, I mean, if you're waiting and outside the door and waiting to set your hand on the knob, or you're inside the door and you let Christ in, he'll come in with the fullness of his promises and of his life. But let's be honest that to develop a relationship with God would take time. And Simeon has developed that. It has happened over time. You test the ways of God and find that his promises are true. You step forth in the strength of God and find that his strength is there to help you. You encounter disappointments and trouble and bad news, and then find that God brings you through. And the picture you could call of that unfolding relationship with God, of that thing that God is doing wants to do in your life, is to give you the habit of hoping. Now, if you think too, Simeon is a public figure. I mean, people would say, there goes Simeon. Oh, yeah, I know the guy. He's so holy inside, and he's just full of love, and he's seeking God, and his lips, you see his lips moving in prayer, just on a given moment, and he sings the Psalms with his heart just swelling, and when he reads the scriptures, you just know that it's like his Lord is talking to him. Simeon is a public figure, so people would come and talk to him. And if you think about the news of the day in Jerusalem when Jesus was born, it was never very good news. But how would Simeon react to that? If somebody said, we just heard another thing about King Herod, and King Herod, who rules here in Jerusalem, is such a rat. There's nothing about him that is good. He calls himself the king of the Jews, and he might as well be the king of the robber barons. It's an awful public figure and an awful leader. What would Simeon's reaction be about him? He'd say, I found that God has been with me all my life, and I know that the older I get, the closer I get to seeing his Christ. Well, that would have a way of shutting down some of that that griping people have, If they came and told him, oh, it's terrible, Simeon, the Romans are going to raise our taxes again, they're going right to the roof. Simeon would say, what? I found that God has been faithful to me all my life. I've never gone without. I've lived my entire life and found that I've been fed, I've been cared for. His love surrounds me, and I know the longer I live, the closer I am to seeing his salvation. And you might try it one more time if you weren't discouraged by the first two. You might say, boy, and in this temple here, I know it's the holy temple of God, and I know there's the sacrifices going on there, but the high priest and the people in charge of that, they're no better than scoundrels. It's the worst situation we could ever have. And Simeon would say, what? He would say, I have been walking with God all my life. I found that he's been faithful to me in good times and bad. He's led me through the waters. He's led me through the fires. He's fed me by his hand, and I know the longer I go, closer I am to seeing his Christ. That's a habit of hoping. That develops from walking in a relationship with God. And if Simeon seems to have gotten a lot farther along the path, well, that's why he's a character in the Bible, and that's why he's an example for how we respond to Christ. But he's been doing things that you and I can do. Now, I have a test case, and so we can go to the next screen. That's my grandma. Okay, that's my grandma. It's a grandma I don't know. Her name's Mary Catherine, was my mom's mother. Okay, and she is a test case. She's a person who hoped. Okay, now I did not know her. I had a step-grandmother named Wilma, who's an entirely other story. I love her, the rest of the family, not so much. But anyway, this was the original grandma. Okay? And this family is full of wonderful stories of God discovered that she was with child, and that child was me. It was not a good time in her life. She'd had 4 children, and I don't know for what reason they felt that that was plenty. And also I was 3 years. I was to be 3 years younger than the brother before me, and a lot younger than the other siblings. They had a busy time in their life. And, things were not prospering. I mean, my dad had a job, and that job didn't pay enough. Dad would drive a cab all night long, and we don't know when he slept, but he would come home from work, get some supper, get a thermos of coffee, and go drive a cab all night, and come home, get a little bit of sleep, going to work. It was not a good time. And her mom, Catherine, grandma, was sick with cancer, and very bad cancer. And so it was known that she just didn't have a lot of time. So mom went, as you do with your aged and sick mothers. She went to see her there in the spring. And as the story goes, her mother, Catherine, looked at her and said, "You're pregnant." Which is fine, because it was without the thing, "Mom, I have something to tell you." Just looked at her and said, "You're pregnant." Okay? And which, of course, makes my mother burst into tears. That's like, I basically the child of grief and woe. I mean, nobody, people were not like saying, "All right," they were not. And Grandma, Catherine up there said, "Don't worry. It will be okay. And this child will be a great blessing." Now, that's big words. Because Grandma wasn't going to live. She died the year I was born. Things didn't get immediately better. It'd be nice if I was born and then suddenly, the money starts showing up in the mail, and and everything, the sun shines on your house all the time. It wasn't like that. And no, I was ill after I died. If I don't do so well, just remember I was sick when I was a kid. I was ill. I was in the hospital. I mean, they didn't get me out for like a month, and so you've got bills, you've got sickness, you have grief, and for years, I mean, my mother could, she was loving. She loved to beg, loved to do for people. She was faithful in her church, but it's a certainty that if you asked her friends, to go down a list of things that were true about my mom, they would not have checked hopeful. You understand? Let me repeat that. My mom had many good qualities, many things about her that you'd be joy to have her in church, and a solid hand at the baking activities, good person in the nursery and that. But you would have not looked at her and said, "Oh yeah, she exemplifies hopeful." No. Well, that was then. Now, where do you think I got that story from? Mom. In fact, in proof of my thesis, didn't hear that story until Mom was a lot older. Right? And it gets better every time. It gets better. She remembers things about the things her mother said about my birth. Including she didn't add the line about "this child will be a real blessing to you." I heard that line this year. Okay, Mom's almost 90. Okay. So do understand that you grow in your relationship. God shows you His faithfulness over the years. God's hand is at work in some mighty ways. He's allowing you to test His love, to find the firmness of His strength, and to get in the habit of hoping. So let's go to the last screen as we look at this. So we're looking at what would constitute the giving of a life-giving Christmas, and steadfastness, his desire to be involved in your life. When you look at Jesus, all right, but from Bethlehem as it begins to his ministry, to his death on the cross, to his glorious resurrection, to the sending of the Holy Spirit, all these show you things about God's love that are important. They'll give you the habit of hoping. They'll show you ways to grow in your relationship to him. And it starts with just letting him in and saying, God, I'm now ready for the things you want to put in my life. And now then you could just say that as you're looking for this Christmas, the things that you're hoping for, they do need to turn from material things. They do need to turn from, hoping for better news. I mean, do not hold your breath to hear good news. You're just never going to hear on the TV good news, But a good first step would be, as I'm likely to say, if you have, a cool thing happen in your life, if there's a grandchild born or a lovely, son and daughter-in-law get married or something like that, you say, I can tell you, that's going to make this a good year no matter what happens, right? The passages, the things that hold promise, when people graduate, when people take steps in their maturing. Look at that. And even better yet, understand that each year God has just the unfolding of his purpose and his plan and his love that's going to be found. There's going to be times when you're facing difficulties and you're going to reach out and say, God, I need strength, and it's going to be there. Solid and sure. There's going to be times when you're saying, this is so confusing and this baffles me beyond belief. And you say, God, if you think about it, God, I need wisdom. And you're going to find that it comes. And you're going to find times that you're sorely tempted, that you're just overwhelmed with that your heart is not right, and how do you get your spirit behind what your head knows you should be doing? And you just say, God, I need help. I need your spirit